Good morning, church. It's the middle of our week. So, once again, I want to remind you and challenge you to intentionally walk with the Lord. So, pray without ceasing, dive into scriptures, serve your neighbors. Let's continue to live a life that is intentional and with Him. With that, let's begin. Now, there are many different types of community that we can experience. One that we're all a part of is the church community. But there are many other ones as well, right? Things like our school communities, different ethnic communities, different communities found in different regions, right? Communities can be a result of similar interests. Like if you have a favorite sports team, you can create a community there. Or communities that are the result of where you live. So people that live on the West Coast have this kind of community. East Coast. Being a part of a community is something that's special, and I think it's really something that we all long to be a part of. We want to be able to connect and be a part of something greater than ourselves, a place where we can be together, a place where we can be, a place where we can be understood and accepted. But I want you to think about kind of the characteristics of the ideal community. What are some things that are important? What should a community look like? Now, one community that I think is a great example and something that I was a part of for a very long time was Orchestra. Now, I'm a huge fan of Orchestra. I love going to concerts. I love going to orchestra things. But for me, really, I really like being a part of the orchestra. Ever since I was young, my parents had me take violin lessons. And when I was younger, I absolutely did not like it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't like to practice. I wanted to do something more cool than the violin, right? But I didn't have a choice. I had to do violin. But as I got older, and specifically when I got to high school, I got a taste of what it was like to play in an orchestra. Now, before that, I went to a small Adventist academy, and there was no orchestra, no program like that. But I did play in small ensembles, so I knew what it was like to play with others. But when I got to high school, it was really the first time that I got to be a part of an orchestra community. And from there, the rest was history. It sparked this sensation of joy and happiness in my life, being a part of a community of different musicians. You might be thinking, oh, Pastor is such an orchestra geek, right? What a nerd. But let me explain to you why it was so appealing and so fun for me, and you might be able to relate to these things as well. People with all different backgrounds, different skill levels, different kind of musicians, instruments, personalities, and then being able to come together and play as one collective unit. And obviously as an orchestra, you're learning these songs, you go day by day, week by week, and you're practicing for hours, you rehearse together, you go through all of these trials, and then on the day of the concert, right, the day you come and perform, you show your hard work to all your friends and your family and people that just come to watch. And I don't know, like that for me, I get these goosebumps when we start performing and then when we come to a close. Another thing that I find really awesome and amazing is that when an orchestra comes together and they tune and then everyone is in tune, right? And then everyone just plays together in harmony, or everyone is following the conductor. It's really just such a beautiful masterpiece. It's art. That aspect is probably the most charming and unique thing about an orchestra. Right? Individual talent, ability, all of that is great, but the beauty of it is the togetherness of coming together and being one. And there's a saying that my orchestra teacher used to always tell us was that the orchestra will only sound as good as your weakest player. So play as one unit. And that's why I think orchestra is a great example of a good community. Today, we look at 1 Peter chapter 3, and we're going to continue talking about hope. But specifically in this chapter, you'll notice that he doesn't really directly talk about hope. What Peter is doing is he's trying to create and teach that there's these guidelines and examples and a lifestyle that we can live that will lead us to holding on to hope. Look at 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8 and 9. It says, "Finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless. For to this you were called, and that you may obtain a blessing." Peter goes on to share some of the qualities of how we can be good to those around us. The first is having unity of mind. Just like the example of orchestra, it's important that we have one goal, one mind. And it's not to say that we have to be all the same or think the same way or be identical, but really it's our goal, our purpose, our reason for being. So as a community, we have to seek to find harmony and togetherness towards this goal of experiencing and sharing the goodness of God in our lives to others, to follow his will. Then Peter says that we should also have sympathy or compassion for one another. It's in doing this that we can truly experience the gospel message. Through small groups, Bible studies, through one-on-one discussions, to those that we love, to show compassion to one another. And then he says to have brotherly love or sisterly love, to live a lifestyle that shows love to each other because we are a family of God. Then we are to have a tender heart, or in other words, we are to have hearts that are broken by the very things that break the heart of God, to allow God to live in us and through us. And then he says that we are to have a humble mind. Some of your translations may say a friendly mind or a courteous mind. In other words, it's not about showing just love to those that are loving and friendly to us, but it's to everyone, even those that may not do that, right? Peter then talks about how we respond to evil. Now remember, these believers are facing persecution, and because they're human, I'm sure they want to just retaliate, right? You punch me, I'll punch you. You fight me, I fight you. But Peter then reminds them, hey, you guys are a community. You're a community of believers that puts your hope in God. And because of that, rather than seeking for revenge, give them your blessing, because that's more powerful as a Christian community. Peter wants this group of believers to be on the same page. And that's why he talks about these traits of a Christian community. And he's saying that this is what community should look like. And don't forget that, because when and if we're able to get to this point, when we're on the same page, when we can live a life that Christ wants us to live, it's easier and clearer for us to hold on together to the hope in Jesus' promise for a better tomorrow. It's about being together. So church, remember this. We are a community. Let's grow together and live more like Christ.